One of the questions that you probably find yourself asking when you're trying to cope with sickness or death in your life or in your family is, what is it like on the other side? And we're going to take a look at what the Bible has to say about that. The first thing that it says is that heaven is for real. And this really should comfort us. Jesus was talking to his disciples, and his disciples were worried because he was telling them that he was going to have to suffer and die on a cross, and he could tell they were stressed out. And he said, don't let your hearts be troubled. And then what he does to encourage them and to comfort them is he talks about heaven. He says in verse 2, my Father's house has many rooms. If that weren't so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. So Jesus used this idea of eternity to comfort his followers. And Paul does the same thing, the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians, another book of the Bible. In verse 13 of chapter 4, he says, brothers and sisters, we don't want you to be uninformed about those who die, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. It's this concept, this idea of hope is so firmly embedded in the Bible that even though troubles will come in the world, the Bible doesn't promise that everything's going to be roses for us. Even though troubles will come into the world, Paul says you don't have to grieve like people without hope. We can have hope. Even in our grieving, we can have hope. That's a powerful thought. In verse 18, he says, therefore encourage one another with these words. So know that heaven is for real, and this should comfort us. And really the second thing is to know is that heaven is not just a spiritual place, that it actually has a physicality to it. In Revelation 21, the apostle or John is writing this letter, and he has this vision of heaven, and he says he was carried away to a mountain great and high, and he was shown the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. And it shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. It had great high wall and 12 gates. And all these descriptions you have of heaven, they're not what maybe sometimes people think we can't even imagine it. It's unfathomable. There's a physicality to it. There's going to be something familiar about heaven, which for me is a real encouragement. To know that there's going to be something familiar about heaven. In fact, we'll have bodies there. The Bible teaches that we're not going to be sort of disembodied spirits floating around, but we're going to have spiritual bodies. Now, they're going to be better than our bodies here. They're going to be whole. They're going to be new again. There's not going to be any suffering or pain or death. And so they're not going to be worn out in disease-ridden bodies. They're going to be new bodies. And that's what Paul answers in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? And he goes on in verse 42, he says, it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable, but it's raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, but it's raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, but it is raised in power. That's really an important thing to know and to have this great hope. And so really the last thing that the Bible teaches us is that there's only one way to get there. There's only one way to get to this heaven that is for real, that should comfort us. And that's actually the topic of the next video. So I'll see you then.